Alright, let's take a look at Nugo Chikadze, or as I call him, the Nugget. Both videos are posted by the AWC Garage channel, which is where I think, in my opinion, you will find some of the best raw training videos on YouTube. So they're worth checking out and subscribing to. So he's starting off with some band warm-ups in the major directions. The bands are not extreme in resistance, and the purpose is only to get the joints moving, and feel out any aches or pains before committing to the full workout. The first proper exercise that he's going with is the bench press. Maybe an unusual choice for some people, but I've noticed that the Georgians, perhaps more than most, except for outliers like some Russians, take the idea of strengthening the whole organism quite seriously. So rather than just training for a very precise and narrow field of strength by specific training only, we can see that Nugget wants to be a generally robust and strong person, which is not a weak goal. The bench press is a good exercise for overall upper body strength, obviously in pressing motions especially, and for arm wrestling it provides a more robust and strong framework to push side pressure through. And just like that, we see him following the bench press with a pure side pressure pulley exercise, so this might be a workout focused more on side or inside strength. With this side pressure exercise, rather than a straight sideways drag, he's clearly involving a lot more wrist flexion and internal rotation, pushing into a press type direction. Now, by textbook numbers, you could say that doing this in this way is not optimal, because the cable is horizontal to his forearm, so not really pulling his arm to the outside, and his wrist is deeply flexed, so there's no wrist training here either. But I think in general, a lot of arm wrestling training works a lot better, within reason, if you simply just put heavy load on the body and joints, and move while holding that position. It's not bodybuilding, it's not even traditional concentric muscle-based strength, but arm wrestling is also neither of those things. So this extreme joint isometric loading that we definitely do see people doing probably does have its place. It's just very hard to categorize and define what's going on, so people are quick to oppose it in favor of optimal leverages and biomechanics, which are easier to talk about. Here we see finger or containment training, which a lot of people have asked about the thumb restriction going on, and as far as I can tell, this is to force the weight to be kept the responsibility of the four fingers, rather than letting the thumb come around and help keep the handle in position, which forces the fingers to not only move the weight, but also to retain high tension throughout the whole exercise, to not let the handle escape. And the handle itself is of a diameter that the center of it, and therefore the loading position, is going to be in the center of the fingers, rather than deep in the hand, making the fingers work even more. And on top of this, based on my own handles, I think they have also added a layer of rubber sheet or tubing around this handle, which serves another purpose rather than just increasing the diameter. Most handles are solid, with the job of the hand and fingers being only to move the handle. But if you introduce a slightly soft surface, like rubber, you introduce the need for the fingers to actively squeeze throughout the whole movement, rather than just hold, which makes the task of the fingers even greater than a normal handle would. Even if you don't have a handle or rubber sheet you can add to it, you can either wrap a towel around a weight or handle, or attach a towel to a pulley system and pull, or even just hold, and you will immediately feel how much actual work the fingers are forced to do to just hold on. With enough work with a handle like this, you end up with an enormous blood flow and pump within the hand and fingers that you don't really get anywhere else, except practicing on the table perhaps. So yes, this is a good exercise, especially for containment and general finger strength. Almost everybody would benefit from something like this. And I don't know about you, but there is definitely something about these rusted, homemade cable systems that somehow feel a lot more weighty and solid than using the more lubricated, ergonomic equipment at most gyms. With this cable, which is a 1-to-1 pulley, the weight on the cable is the weight in your hand. There is no 2-to-1 mechanical advantage or other nicety to make the movement more comfortable or soft, or to dampen inertia. To me, that is a much better way for training to feel. Next we have a nice big wrist wrench, again with a soft padding on the surface, which again makes it much more involved to grip. and creates a massive blood flow into the whole hand, which for this pre-competition maintenance mode training is going to be very beneficial. And we can see here that there is not even much concern for match-specific rules, like keeping the elbow on the pad. The goal here is again to simply move weight. If you don't have a wrist wrench, you really do need one. Aside from a judo belt, they're probably the most beneficial handle for anybody to have, and you don't even need to pay for a fancy one. You can build your own for very cheap and easily. I can make a video outlining the process of that if you want to see it. It's not very specific, but it's strengthening the whole chain involved with wrist and elbow flexion with back pressure engaged in the same way that they are on the table. You can see that Nugget is starting to lose the ability to move fully from how much pump and fatigue he has built up in the forearm and hand. Now we have those classic arm wrestling curls that everybody loves to critique. Again, I will just say on this exercise that he is simply putting heavy weight on the elbows and moving it quickly. And now we have the classic pronation, rising, whatever exercise. It's not optimal, the angles are all wrong, there's very little eccentric and the body is far too involved. But again, he is putting a heavy load on the elbow through pronation and moving that load, much like you would need to do on the table. This subtle variation is quite interesting and one that I've been thinking about experimenting more with. This is essentially a strap-loaded hammer curl, but with the wrist in deeper pronation than neutral, making it into more of a reverse curl to target the elbow in full pronation, so a lot of brachioradialis involvement, so good for top roll and general elbow health. The problem with doing traditional barbell or dumbbell reverse curls is that a lot of the work, when the weight gets heavier, is challenging to wrist extension and the ability of your fingers to prevent the bar from slipping through them, while optionally also holding all of that weight right on top of the thumb. So using a strap, as here, may be a viable option, since you're able to move the strap down to the base of the hand by the wrist, so all of the finger involvement and wrist extension is essentially nullified. Of course, the main problem is that the range of motion becomes more limited, since the strap doesn't like to stay on the hand when the hand isn't at 90 degrees to it, so the exercise will have to be a more mid-range focus movement rather than a full range. Let's get on now to the Matt Mask preparation. So we are starting again with a non-arm wrestling specific exercise, this time a unilateral dumbbell press. Does it directly do anything for arm wrestling strength? Probably not really. But does pressing 70 kilograms with one arm make quite a strong person in general? Yes, absolutely. And is being strong beneficial for arm wrestling? Yes, I would say so. So that is about as deep as it needs to go, really. Again, more hand control exercises, but this time using some of Alijan Muratov's range of handles, which I have to say are pretty good overall in my experience. This one works by keeping the load all the way out to the fingertips while strapping in the hand on the back, basically mimicking the type of strength needed to stop someone from top rolling you at the start. Again, more bench press, more general strength training. Is it specific? No. Is it beneficial in general to be able to bench press 140 kilograms for a lot of reps? Yes, probably. More wrist wrench pulls. You can see as he pulls that the wrist wrench actually spins inside his hand until he puts enough grip force into it, preventing that movement. Although this handle does have a diamond type knurling, it is still quite smooth and hard, unlike the softer rubber we spoke about before. And we can see that Otar and Nika have chosen a softer wrist wrench. Maybe a coincidence, but maybe for the reasons I just outlined. Printed 3D handles are good, but they are light and brittle, whereas metal, wood and rubber are much grippier, more solid materials and often turn out cheaper than buying a 3D printed one. And again, more nugget style curls. No control, no muscle involvement, just pure joint loading madness, which fits nugget style quite well in general. But that's it, more aimless rambling, and I'll see you next time.